All right. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Rehana Lainwala. My pronouns are she, her. I am the Chief Communications Officer at Launch. And I am just really excited to see you all here tonight. We have, as you know, just recently completed a strategic planning process, and we are really excited for our community to engage in this work. We feel really good about where we're going and are excited to have you all join us in this work. And we know that what it will take to be successful is the engagement, the support, and the commitments of all of our community. So just a little information about what the program is going to look like tonight. So we are going to present our strategic plan briefly to y'all, but really the bulk of this event tonight is really about getting our community's engagement, hearing your feedback, your suggestions, your connections. Can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Your suggestions and your engagement and how you want to be a part of this process. So a lot of this will be breakout groups where you can provide your own insights and suggestions. Oops. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So we're going to begin tonight with a land acknowledgement just to ground our meeting. We also start with a labor acknowledgement. So as we begin our gathering tonight, we respectfully acknowledge that our virtual event today is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land, and that we are on the homelands of the Duwamish people. We pay respect to Coast Salish elders past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize its longer history and our place in that history. To recognize this land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside and work on, and is a way of honoring the Indigenous peoples who have been living and working on this land from time immemorial. It's important that we understand the long-standing history that's brought us to reside and work on this land, and that we understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements don't exist in a past tense or even in a historical context. Colonialism is an ongoing process, and we need to all be mindful of our present participation. And then we also have a labor acknowledgement. So we recognize and acknowledge the labor upon which our country, our state, and our institutions are built. We remember that our country is built on the forced labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the US from the African continent, and recognize the continued contributions of their survivors. The labor of slaves built many of the economic, cultural, social, and political systems with which we all interact with daily. And the end of slavery was followed by a series of discriminatory and repressive laws built on anti-Black racism. The generational trauma of slavery and the racist laws and practices that continue to be passed and implemented impact our culture and our institutions at every level. We also want to acknowledge all the immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples who contributed to the building of this country and who continue to serve in our labor force. Here in the Pacific Northwest, this includes Chinese, Japanese, and Filipino immigrants who, despite helping build railroads across the country and playing a vital role in sectors such as logging, mining, fishing, and agriculture during the 19th century, were subject to exclusionary laws and internment. We acknowledge all unpaid caregiving labor. Finally, we acknowledge that many of our institutions rely on hourly, student, contingent, and unpaid labor, and we recognize those contributions. And then finally, before we dive into the strategic plan, we always like to ground our meetings in color-brave space norms. These were created by Equity Matters, which is a local organization. And this really just makes sure that we are being mindful in our meetings about the way that we show up. So, we want to make sure we're putting relationships first and building community and racialized trust and care. We want to focus on our common goal to create racial justice through Black liberation and Native sovereignty. We want to notice and shift racialized power dynamics and just be aware of how we all act on our power, our privilege, and our advantage. Create a space for multiple truths while also prioritizing and believing lived experiences of racism. We want to be kind and color brave and explicitly address settler colonialism, anti-Blackness, and white supremacy. Practice examining racially biased systems, because systems are what are left when everyone here tonight leaves this room. Look for learning and commit to learning in public. We want to avoid playing the devil's advocate that upholds white dominant power structures. The devil has enough advocates. And finally, it's really important that in everything we do, we center collective Indigenous and Black expertise, norms, and joy, and be thinking about how racism intersects with gender, class, and disability. Okay, and then finally, before we move on, I just want to give a quick shout out to our strategic planning work group. Our work group consisted of staff of all levels of the agency, from teachers to site managers to office staff and executive leadership. And they are the reason that we have such an ambitious plan that really feels true to our values and our mission. And this group was so dedicated that even after their scope of work was over, they actually asked to stay on longer because they were so committed to this work. So thank you all. And finally, I am going to introduce our CEO, Dr. Angela Griffin, who is going to talk a little bit about the strategic planning process and some of our goals.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our strategic plan session. I'm so excited to be able to share with you the process that we went through and the results that we came up with over this year-long endeavor to set the launch up with a very solid, strong strategic plan that will be implemented over the next 3 years. And so a little bit about the background. We actually spent a little over a year, and that was intentional because we wanted to make sure that staff at all levels of the organization were able to engage in the process. And so then we wanted to make sure that we were valuing the time of our staff who were in the classrooms and needing to be available to their students, as well as take into consideration when we have breaks, so that our staff who have worked continuously, even since the pandemic, our programs have been nonstop. We wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity to take the holiday breaks that we offer at launch and be able to have the space to take care of themselves. We planned in times that were gap times, and it extended our process a little over a year. In this process, we were intentional about engaging our staff, our families, our board, funders, partners, community members, and we did that through some focus groups, some survey opportunities, and just having regular conversation with individuals and groups along the planning process. And then the goal that we set when we finished the strategic plan is to have a 3-year operational plan for our staff and our board, and those of you who are in community that partner with us, to be able to know how we could move forward with the aspirational goals that we have as an organization, but also be able to implement the day-to-day work that is important to supporting children and families and community. So the aspirational goals that we have set as an organization come from our board. Our board actually identifies goals and outcomes that they want to make sure our children and our families will achieve way beyond any of us being part of the organization or supporting the organization or or engaged in any kind of way. This is the long-term goal setting that is critical for organizations to be successful. And so they identified 3 key areas that they believe will have a powerful vision for the future of not just Launch, but then also for the children and families that we serve. And so the vision that they have set aligns with our goals that you'll see in the strategic plan around the childcare sector and how we can make sure that it is sustained over a long time, not just internally within Launch, but also externally as our communities need access to childcare, our businesses need access to childcare, and that it is equitable for all who may need to engage in it, but then also that those who are educating and leading and a part of the work that gets done in the sector have equitable experiences as well. Family empowerment is the second element, and this is how we make sure we're using a holistic approach to supporting families from a socioeconomic standpoint to they're culturally affirming and then also economically supporting. And then the last area is that our children at the end of the day are change agents. They have been built up and provided the resources and the support and the empowerment to serve in our communities, to be systems change leaders, and to be able to move things forward that are beneficial for all, that maybe some of us will not be able to move forward in our lifetime, but our children, I love the saying, children are our future. They really are. And this is the aspirational goal that Launch has that leads to that. So the strategic planning process included a variety of steps. Again, I shared surveying, focus groups. We identified big questions. What are some areas that we know that only Launch could be able to address because we have the resources, we have the infrastructure, we have the will to address, and we identified those big questions. We looked at the challenges that exist in community and what the landscape is that we are up against in achieving our goals. And then we developed the work group, which Rayhana identified earlier. She shared the members of that work group. And that work group took time to analyze all of the feedback and all of the data that we collected from the focus groups, from the surveys, from ongoing feedback that we were getting from staff in professional development days and board meetings and community conversations. That group analyzed all that information and data and then drafted the big questions, the strategies, and the goals. And then our executive leadership team and our board provided ongoing continuous feedback as we got to the end of the planning process. What we're looking for the strategic plan to be is a living document. And so we want to make sure that we can continue to iterate on the strategic plan as the landscape changes, as there's shifts in the organization, if funding changes out in our sector, that we can make adjustments and adaptations around the strategies and the tactics and the implementation plan in response to those big questions that will stay the same. And so that you'll get to see a little bit more of that in the next few slides. So before I move further with sharing a little bit more about the strategies, tactics, and the goals, just want to share our strategy screen. And this is what we passed all of our decision-making processes through in identifying the big questions, the strategies, the goals, making sure that they were all a right fit for Launch. And initially, the screen was based on mission and values, and equity and anti-racism. And then also we wanted to make sure that we were including that they would have the right impact on children, families, and staff. But then we also wanted to make sure that we're setting them up to be the right resource for marginalized communities. And so to move forward, we had to answer yes to all of the questions that you see on your screen, which is our strategy screen. If we answered yes to the previous questions, then we would move forward with evaluating whether or not the opportunity aligned with our board ends. And then that was one of the final points that we wanted to make sure that we were connecting with. And of course, that we needed to have the finances, it needed to be sustainable, and we also needed to have the staff resources to move it forward. We don't want to start anything at launch that we will not be able to sustain. And what you'll see in our strategic plan is a desire to grow our services and build our services out to reach more communities. And at the same time, that reach and those connections need to be aligned with our mission, our equity goals, our aspirational ends, whether or not it's sustainable, and then whether or not we have the resources to provide those services. So the vision that we have for the next few years is intended to transform Launch's work, our approach, and our services. We want Launch to continue to grow as not just one of the largest childcare organizations in Seattle, but also one of the largest childcare organizations in our region. And it's not just because we want, a big program, but if you look at some of the survey data that's coming out in King County around the gap in childcare, we want to be a resource to address that gap. And so that's where we see ourselves growing very intentionally, making sure again that we look at program opportunities that align with our strategy screen, that align with our mission, our values, our aspirational goals. We want to expand to new cities and offer these new programs in areas where our families tell us that they have a need. So we're thinking geographically, but not just new spaces, just for new spaces, but really that the community has identified that there is a need. Central to our ability to expand is the way we can recruit and retain and support staff in their careers. So this is where we see Launch leading the charge on staff compensation, benefits, education, and career pathways. We are already making great progress with our programs in Seattle by being very intentional in identifying where the wage equity gap is, where our staff see themselves growing career-wise, and then making moves towards those outcomes internally, and then looking forward to being a model for what that looks like externally in community. And then we want to deepen our family and youth engagement around the work that we have at Launch. And so this all sounds great, right? I'm excited to see Launch accomplish this in the coming years. This is not going to be business as usual in the childcare and youth development sectors. This really is a radical departure from how most organizations approach this work. And I'm really excited to see that Launch will continue to lead the charge and transform the way nonprofits engage with families and with youth, and how we support our staff. So part of our strategic plan involved an evaluation of the current landscape, where we're facing both challenges as well as opportunities. here are some of the challenges and the opportunities that we've identified. And these are going to inform our work over the coming years. So we've seen that there's a lack of access to quality childcare, which I spoke about when we're talking about moving to new areas in our region. We've seen continued healing and recovery from the pandemic. I firmly believe we have a little ways to go to really see that type of transformation. And then we continue to see staffing shortages in the childcare sector. Although that is the case across all sectors, what we firmly believe is that the childcare sector supports our economy and our businesses. And so if there's staffing shortages with our programs, then that keeps people from being able to work and support their families. And so we want to address that. We also see an opportunity to continue to focus on being culturally responsive and having approaches that support mental health and social emotional learning. And then there's an opportunity to continue to build on our collaboration and collective action as an organization. So during the strategic planning process, our community identified a number of strengths that we can use to move our work forward. These strengths are why we know we can achieve our vision for the future. Now, I'd like to introduce you to Launch's Chief Program and Strategy Officer, Laura Nicholson. And Laura is going to share the first part of our strategic plan, including some of the strategies and tactics that we'll be taking over the next 3 years.
Thank you, Angela. So, as Angela mentioned earlier, our strategic plan asks some really big picture questions that we are attempting to answer kind of immediately and then also over the course of the next 3 years. So the first question that we're focusing on is how we can grow and meet the needs of children, families, and our community in light of gentrification, regional growth, and continued impacts of the pandemic on our community. And within that, our goal is to really be looking at new services and programs that are implemented to fulfill unmet needs of families in King County by 2026. And so what Launch will be using is our continuous quality improvement approach to understand Launch's capabilities for innovation and achievement of our mission and our board's aspirational goals. So we're going to be making sure that our current programs maintain their high quality performance that they always have, and that we're continuing to meet our current family and student needs, but also looking to growing our programs and services and really meeting the needs of new families in new communities, not at the expense of our current programs. And before we can decide how we're going to expand, we also need to kind of take a look at what is out there. So we're going to need to do landscape analysis and saturation studies on various areas, really looking at King County specifically, but even farther south, and see where those big childcare deserts are and what communities are looking for in those spaces. Where are the gaps in the services, and then where is the greatest need for our programs? And then there actually are already 2 existing systems that are in, through DCYF, which is a agency that we interact with pretty regularly, and some other systems. So we can actually kind of take a look at these already, and then we will be doing our due diligence of a deep dive into that data and making sure that we are analyzing and approaching new communities and new spaces with that in mind. And then our strategy number 3 is the selection of new or expanded services and approaches that Launch will take to support families, including new partnerships and new relationships with funders. We'll be using the results of those saturation studies and landscape analysis. And really, as Angela mentioned, we're not just focused on geography. We're also talking about different types of programs and different services, as well as the ages that we serve. Some things we may consider include middle school programming for middle school age students, or infant care, or new types of family support services to really kind of meet the needs of the whole child and the whole family. And then part of the expansion is looking at new partnerships and evaluating our services. We'll be using our quality improvement model to evaluate our work and impact, and then create improvement plans using the assess, plan, improve cyclical model. And within that, we're also going to be, asking some really key questions about new services. Are they impactful? Are they beneficial? Are they sustainable? And making sure that we're really focusing on input from families as we are looking to run new programs. So with that is our big question number 1. And I'm going to turn things over to Gretchen, who is Launch's Director of Investment and Partnerships, who will take the next part of our strategic plan.
Thank you, Laura. So as Laura said, the next part of our strategic plan, big question number 2, is all about staff. So how do we grow and retain a thriving and engaging workforce? And as you may already know, childcare and education sectors are experiencing a severe staffing crisis. The crisis predated the pandemic, but things in the past few years have made it a lot worse, as many childcare providers have been forced to close. So one of the main focuses of this next strategic plan is how can we radically transform the way that we engage and support staff and make Launch the best place to work. So the goals are focused on reducing turnover and concurrently creating a strong culture at Launch so that staff have an incredible experience here. So our first strategy is to identify adaptive solutions to increase the number of staff hired and to reduce the turnover rate. Data shows that childcare and youth development teachers are chronically and markedly underpaid compared to equally educated workforces, including public education teachers who are working with the same age children. Our goal is to ensure our staff make not just a living wage, but a wage that allows them to really thrive as contributing members of their communities. And so to do this, we need to invest heavily in staff compensation and benefits, which will require new funding from public and private funders. We will examine the full experience of employees from their hire date to when they decide to leave and identify any gaps and develop a plan to improve our employees' experiences. Second strategy is ensuring that staff are empowered to maximize their skills through professional development, resources, and equitable support. So part of creating that strong work culture is making sure that staff have those opportunities for continuing education and professional development to lean into areas of work that they would like to grow into over the long run. So creating those career paths is really essential. Strategy 3, equipping supervisors. We also want to make sure our managerial staff have the tools that they need to be really strong supervisors and effectively manage and coach their teams and other individuals too. And this will include training and the creation of toolkits and supports. Fourth strategy is assessing and improving equitable internal policies, practices, and communication. So implementing new policies and approaches may have unintended consequences. So we will create a tool that screens whether policies and practices are equitable. And we also want to ensure that staff receive all the information that they need to do their job well and understand the decisions that have been made and have the opportunity to share what matters most to them. So we have increased our advocacy efforts under Angela's strong leadership, and we will continue to grow this part of our work. We have incredibly talented and experienced staff, and we want to support them and uplift their voices and experiences in our advocacy efforts. Next, I would love to introduce my colleague, Monica, who is our Rainier Community Center site manager, and she will be presenting the final part of our strategic plan.
Thank you, Gretchen. So the big question we're working on is number 3, and this question talks about how does launch support whole child and whole family engagement while providing services that equitably promote their success. So how do we engage with them? Our goals for this big question are to develop transformative engagement with families and youth that is inclusive, integrated, individualized, and impactful. Staff and families are better informed and access current resources available to them. So how are we getting this information out? So our strategy 1 for this big question is to define family engagement and clarify what is needed for our families and children. We do this by holding surveys, listening sessions to identify resources families need and how they want to engage with launch. And we also compare what we currently offer families to the feedback we receive to identify gaps and opportunities for improvement. Strategy 2 would be identify launch capacity to engage families, including resources and staffing. So we would do the family assessment data to determine specific resources and staff needed to meet their needs, identify the partnerships and how we can use that to leverage to meet family needs, identify other community resources to refer families to, and create a process for capturing and analyzing data to demonstrate the impacts of the supports the launch provides. Strategy 3 would be to develop internal systems that build community and collaboration among sites, families, and the organization as a whole. We do this by develop opportunities for cross-site, cross-department relationship building a consistent communication model for all stakeholders, including families, partnerships, internally within launch, identify opportunities for families and staff to share their talents in programming or volunteering, and creating opportunities for families to build community and provide mutual support for each other. And the last strategy is increase equitable access to key information and transformative engagement with families, including families with cultural, language, or ability differences. So becoming welcoming and inclusive to non-English speaking communities, partnering with organizations that provide specialized support based on the specific needs of families. This can just also be getting the information in different languages for our families in need. And I think that was it. So I am gonna give it back to Rayhana.
Thank you so much, Monica. Okay, so that's our strategic plan. We hope that you are as excited as we are for this work, but now we have to take this amazing strategic plan and operationalize it. What are the tactics, what are the steps to implement this plan to really achieve it? Because you can have a great strategic plan, but if you're not really actively engaging your community and taking individualized steps to achieve this plan, you won't be successful. So this is where we're looking for your input, your feedback. So we have an opportunity now to go into breakout rooms. So we're going to have 4 breakout groups based on aspects of our strategic plan, and you will be able to choose, self-select into whichever aspect of the strategic plan that interests you the most. So we'll have a programs and expansion group, a fundraising and partnerships group, staff compensation and culture group, and then a group that is going to be talking about youth and family engagement and support. So the questions we have are, you're going to have 30 minutes to talk with your group and just brainstorm. And the questions we have for you are, what should we be thinking about? What are your suggestions? Who should we be partnering with? What are the kinds of services and resources and programming that we should be considering? What do you want to see from us? Who are the people we should be talking to? What connections should we be making? And this is really where you have the opportunity to inform our implementation plan and how we take this great strategic plan and put it into action. I'm going to put a link to our Jamboard in the chat, and then we'll also have an opportunity to come back to the full group at the end and share some ideas and inspirations. And then there'll also be an opportunity at the end for questions and comments and anything in the full group. But this is really your opportunity to help tell us the way that we need to be doing this work. So I hope you're excited and you have lots of great ideas. I'm going to open up the group, but then before I do, I'm just going to drop in into this the link to the Jamboard. And then I also have for you links to our full strategic plan. Oops, why did that? Sorry, that went in as a, let's see, to our strategic plan. And then I also have, here's a link to our full strategic plan. And then, oops, it looks like the first Jamboard link went in as a PDF. Hold on one second.
Brianna, it's there. We see it.
Oh, it is there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
It looks strange on my end. And then this is a link to a one-page version of the strategic plan that you can also review. So I am going to open up our breakout rooms right now. So feel free to go into a room that really inspires you. You'll have 30 minutes to talk and come up with some ideas, and then we'll come back as the full group. Okay, the breakout rooms should be open, so feel free to join whichever ones inspire you.
And if for some reason you're not able to get into one of the breakout rooms, you can let us know which one you prefer and we can move you there.
If you're having any trouble joining a room, just let me know and I can just assign you to one. So our programs and expansion group, would someone like to share some of the things that you spoke about?
I took the notes, so I'm happy to speak. The group was Derek and Barbara and Shannon and I, and we really focused specifically around kind of some of the expansion work that we're doing, but also I'm gonna say Barbara is actually with St. Luke's Episcopal Church, who is in the process of building in partnership some low-income housing in the Ballard area, and there is going to be a childcare kind of associated with that space. And so we spent a lot of time with also Derek's background in affordable housing, spent a lot of time kind of talking about how exciting it is to see these projects happening in the city of Seattle, you know, after years and years and years of knowing that there needs to be more affordable housing. And so and then also how many of them are interested in having childcare in those spaces. And so we talked about some various connections that that Barbara is going to help us do. Derek has a brilliant idea that he's going to share with me in a little bit, and we didn't quite get to it. And then also just kind of thinking strategically and big picture about, you know, how are we tracking things like new developments that might have a childcare space in them, and then also leveraging some of our connections, you know, such as the oh my gosh, the Greater Childcare Business of Greater Seattle Association, which is a group of brilliantly minded executive directors and CEOs from childcares across the city, and really also, you know, making sure that they're aware that some of this is happening, and leveraging the strength and voice of that group for not just the advocacy around low-income housing, but also the advocacy of, you know, if the city is really supporting low-income housing that has childcare in it, then how do we also get more funding, more support for those childcares to be in those spaces? It was a very exciting conversation.
It sounds super exciting. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, partnerships and fundraising. Is there someone who'd like to share out?
I'll kick us off because I took the notes. I was lucky to have Nick and Michael in my small group, and we talked about kind of, the things that stood out and more specific metrics and other details of the programs or something that we will be providing. And both of them were seeking, how are we going to do this? Details that will come out in the implementation plan and the fund development plan and case study where we identify exactly how we're going to do this. We talked a lot about corporate sponsorships and creating some warm connections to some vibrant young professionals in these organizations who could consider being on our board or could consider getting really active with a corporate matching program to generate funds for us, or lots of different other, day of service kinds of opportunities that may come from those corporate connections. So Michael had some ideas on that, and I will continue to pursue what I have, but for all present here, I'm all ears and seeking your help to make those warm connections. We also talked about community-based partnerships and learning from organizations that may serve youth after they leave us. And so Michael brought up Rainier Scholars and has 3 different contacts he's going to link me up with. And so building that out, those community partnerships in the new neighborhoods, we talked about a little bit as well. So Nick and Michael, feel free to add what I've missed here.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That's lots of great stuff there. I'm super interested to hear from the staff compensation and culture group because, that's something that our whole sector has really been struggling with. So I'd love to hear some of the things that you came up with, some things that we should be considering, folks we should be talking to. Is there someone from that group who'd like to share?
Hi, Rihanna, it's Darlene. I was in the group with Megan and Carrie, and we, the 3 of us had a unique advantage that we have a connection to launch in different capacities. So we did talk and shared a little bit about trying to figure out what is the existing need within launch, and if there's a way to get the boots on the ground to talk to folks who have left the organization to find out the why behind that. And we did talk a little bit about how surveys can be hard to get a pulse because people don't respond to them. But is there a way to what's the word on the street, I guess you could say, between faculty that can help see some of the trends on what that looks like. And we did talk about just making things have a livable wage for employees and thinking about, especially in the out of school time sector or the expanded learning sector, that a lot of time that's with college students. And so how do you make wages enough that college students could still have time to focus on their studies, but yet be committed to also working in the out of school time field. So we had some conversations about that. And then, something that we thought about, or at least I thought about when Megan was talking, is that investment in faculty around their own mental health. Like, we have a lot of resources that go into children and families, but thinking about the stresses of life and the workforce in general and how often people are leaving this industry, COVID having a huge piece of that. And people are starting to think about whether or not they want to stay in this industry. So just having a lot of mental health support for faculty can help find that gap. And then I also work in this industry. So I was sharing with Carrie and Megan some of the things that we have done to increase salary, wages, and investments in our faculty so that we can retain more of the people who are devoted to this industry and making it a professional field. And then the last thing that we talked about was just the advocacy work in showing how important early learning is and the youth development field is, and that using the momentum of the pandemic to keep that advocacy going, because a huge spotlight was put on this industry when everybody needed the services, as essential workers, and then taking that information and using that to drive the funding support to offset the cost of tuition so that you can pay faculty higher salary compensation and include stuff like benefits, the mental health piece, and other areas that if you pay for those pieces, they don't have to take care of that themselves. So we were just going back and forth talking about all these different ideas, and we put some stuff on the Jamboard for you all. But really, none of us are working directly with your faculty anymore, so it's really hard to know what the need is. So a lot of our conversation was like, how can we find out what the need is, then come up with other solutions.
Yeah, and I can speak a little bit to that. We did ask our staff last year, what do you consider to be a living wage? Like what would really help you feel like you could pay your bills, you could live your life, and you could really do the things that you want to do without stressing. And Angela, I believe the number was 32 an hour.
31 an hour.
31 an hour. And so, we're really proud that we've raised wages a lot at launch over the last couple of years, but we are not at 31 an hour for all of our staff, particularly our after school staff. So we know that there's a lot of work to do. And I really appreciate what you said about advocacy and kind of collective action, because I think, our initial estimates are it'll take us an additional $1 million a year just to bring staff up to the wage that they need to. And so we can't pass those costs on to families. So I think you're 100% right that there's a lot of advocacy and collective action work we can do as a sector to really advocate for our government to make some interventions.
Well, and can I add one more thing that I remember people talking about, Darlene was sharing, that one way that things can work well is if a particular type of staff tends to be college students, maybe before and after school staff tend to be that, allow, having flexibility that works with their scheduling and their other needs. So maybe you have more students who work fewer hours and you're more flexible with them, rather than identifying just the few who are going to meet exactly the hours that you need. And then have other folks who really are full-time, because that's the whole thing with compensation. It's an hourly wage, but you don't have enough hours. So you got real high hourly, you don't have enough hours, or do you have enough hours and enough pay? It's that whole thing goes into the total package of compensation. So looking flexibly at ways that you can tap different sources of your staffing and labor was another great idea that was brought up.
Thank you so much. I love all these ideas. It's super helpful. Okay, we've got one more group, and then we'll open up for any questions or additional comments. Monica or Safi, did you want to share some of the things that we spoke about?
I can go ahead. But before, I wanted to make one comment for the last compensation. So I've actually been working for Launch since about 2017, off and on 2019. I actually started as a volunteer, and then I went to an assistant teacher, a lead teacher, back to part-time to go finish my master's program. And now I'm the program site manager for one of the preschool sites. And Carrie, you kind of hit the spot right on this about flexibility. I just want to give my kudos just being a person in Launch and part of the team that they had the most flexibility. And this is probably why I'm still here. And the compensation has just been great. Over the years, you get your raise, they help you. I told my supervisor that I was going to take time off to go to school, and he was like, okay, well, just let me know if you need the hours or you still need that little bit extra pay every now and then to get the hours to help financial aid does not cover a whole lot, especially for, big universities like UW. So I just want to say that they were so flexible with me, whether it was working 5 hours a week to 15 when I had breaks. I would work with them as much as possible. And like, if I was late or like I had to leave early or I would get there, like sometimes I would work a 4 to 6 shift. So definitely the flexibility was there, and I could attest to it as like I'm still working for launch. So definitely appreciate their flexibility and just working with me going back to school. So it's definitely there. I just think the communication from staff to supervisors to admin is just very adaptable and flexible to everyone's story, essentially. So yeah, I just wanted to give a little bit of background about that. And then we jumped into youth and family engagement. There was only 3 of us, and Safi's on the board, and I work for Launch, and Rayhana also works for Launch. So we kind of were missing that key community member, family, to give their opinions on just family engagement and youth engagement. I think the biggest one for our strategic plan is the communication and how we communicate with families. Sometimes surveys don't always work because not a lot of people fill them out. We tried emails, people miss the emails. So we're kind of working on a new app to how we can improve our communication with families back and forth. And then for youth engagement, I know Safi and Rayhana touched base on this, is like just asking the kids what they're interested in, adapting to like everything that's happening in the world. I know a lot of kids are getting into iPhones and games. Like, how can we realistically adapt to that and bring certain things to our program that the kids will enjoy to do? And then I had to step out to take my dog to the bathroom. So I don't know if I missed anything else. Rayhana and Safi, if you want to jump in and add anything.
I think you covered it, Monica, the key points.
All right, thank you all. I really appreciate all of the thoughtful suggestions. I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Griffin. We have some time for questions or comments or just even further discussion. And then we can thank you all and say goodnight if there are no questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I was reading through the Jamboard and I really loved all that I saw. Some of it was very validating of what we have been already doing and validating of some of the implementation that we're considering in our plan. And then also some new suggestions that I know the team will consider going forward. So thank you all for investing your time and your thought leadership into this conversation tonight. So just want to see if there's any additional questions or thoughts anyone would like to share. I see Monica put something in the chat. Let me get to it, Monica. You can come up with me if you want to, but I'll say, looking at other nonprofits and seeing who they are working with, or the resources they are providing. If you want to say any more to that, but if anybody wants to add any additional comments or thoughts, the floor is open. Or questions? It's quite a group.
I have a question that I've gotten from some folks, and I know the answer, but I think it would be helpful for you to share, folks, with other folks. Angela, you're leaving Launch. What does that mean for the strategic plan?
Good question, Rayhana. Nice setup too. Wasn't prepared for that one. Thanks. No, actually, well, for me, I'd say the timing is really great that we completed the strategic plan when we did, and then the way that we did it. I mean, I as the CEO of the organization, none of it was about me or even my leadership. It really was about what the community wanted, what our families wanted, what our staff said was important to carry forth. And then we made sure that there was buy-in at all levels of the organization so that individuals and teams and departments and groups can make sure we carry out the strategic plan. So I have a high level of confidence that the goals we set are achievable. and an even higher level of confidence that the individuals that are working at launch will are prepared and resourced and have the capacity to carry forth the plan. So I'm excited. I'm excited to be on the other side and watching and supporting in any way that I can. As I think it's a great plan. Thanks for asking, Rihanna. Other questions or thoughts? We got a couple of board members on here. Would any of you want to answer that question from your perspective or your vision? No, everybody's quiet tonight. See Derek coming on the screen.
I mean, I was just going to pipe in and add, you know, the board has been excited for this strategic plan for a year. So, you know, in all the effort that has gone into it, the board has been a part of the process. The employees have been a part of the process. The leadership team is a part of the process. And, you know, even though our fearless leader is leaving, all the other leaders in the organization, we really believe in the work that went into this plan. And so the work continues on, and we're going to be using this as our springboard to continue doing the mission of the organization. So, I mean, it's, you know, all this stuff is baked in, and it's nice because we kind of have the baton to pass. And I think that puts us in a stronger position than so many other organizations whenever they have leadership change. So I think that there's a lot of relief in that, because there's a lot of been work into this, and it's, I think, produced a really good and workable product.
Thanks for that, Derek. Thanks for sharing. So I'm going to ask Rihanna to drop in the chat our strategic plan. We have the full plan, and we also have a one-pager for everyone's viewing pleasure and to dive into and ask even more questions as they come up. You're going to receive an email communication with this video link, as well as the documents, again, in case you're not able to access them in the chat. And then we are going to be sharing, or the team is going to be sharing the strategic plan broadly and engaging in further conversation and moving forward with implementation. The idea is that this is not a plan that sits in someone's inbox or email or on SharePoint or wherever you might keep their documents. I like to print paper out, so I got a lot of paper around me. So I have the former strategic plans printed out and highlighted and circled and marked up and checked off when we did things. And so I envision that this is a plan that's going to be put into action, and everyone is going to have an opportunity to engage in a variety of ways, but then also see the results, see our goals achieved, and see us get closer and closer to achieving our aspirational goals. Barbara, I see you coming off mute. You have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the same thing I said to my small working group, which is that to the board members and to all of the staff who are a part of this, thank you for the work you do. It is so important and makes such a difference in the world. And we all know that having housing and having early childhood education are the two things that predict how the world is going to change, not only in the lives of those individuals, but also in our lives as a community. So thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Barbara. Wow, that is a great close. And we didn't pay, we didn't send any notes. Amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for all you do in community as well. And so appreciate you. All right, well, we're going to say good night. And again, look for the communication to hit your inboxes soon, and feel free to reach out if you have further questions, thoughts, or feedback. Thank you. Good night.